This is the APNX V1, and no, you're not the only one noticing that it cuts some corners. Or at least one quarter, that is, just like the NZXT H6 Flow. Could this be the spiritual successor to our best testing case of 2023? We're about to find out right here, right now on Robeytech. APNX is not a name we hear too often here in the PC building space, but it's not new to us here at Robeytech. We actually did a couple of videos featuring the APNX C1, also known as the Creator one. It had some funky curves and it came in a cool color-changing finish, which was pretty rad to see. The thing even won a Red Dot Design Award for its striking appearance and its high level of user-friendliness. That's actually pretty high praise, but if you want our take, check out our video right here. But APNX, the brand, aka Advanced Performance Nexus, isn't sitting on their victories, and they aren't done giving us interesting PC cases. Enter the APNX V1. Does that V stand for victory, for the variety of options it comes in, for its volume and size, or does it stand for very difficult to hide cables in? That's way too much alliteration for one video, but let's find out which V fits the very best. Starting with prices and models, at the time of this video, the APNX V1 is available in 3 different colorways. We got black, white, or white and black, for between $120 and $150. What's also interesting here is that the V1 has a few options for different accent panels, including a steel grille design and one with wood paneling like the one we have here. It's very fractal north looking. Now when we start looking at comparable cases, the V1 shares a price range with cases like the Lee 011 Vision, the NZXT H6 Flow, and funny enough, the Fractal North. So this lands the V1 in a really competitive landscape with some very performant cases as well. As far as physical dimensions go, the V1 is about as tall as the Lee Landcool 216, it's as long as the Antec C7, and it's as wide as the NZXT H9 Flow. So it's definitely bigger than the NZXT H6 Flow, which we've already likened it to. When it comes to the weight, the APNX V1 is just under 12 kilograms or 26 pounds. Now from a comparison standpoint, that puts it around the same weight as the NZXT H9 Flow. The one thing we noticed about the weight here is that because of where the PSU sits, the V1 ends up being a bit of a top-heavy case. So don't just go sitting it on any willy-nilly soft surface, or your cat might just push it over. As for I/O and controls here, the V1 keeps things in line with most cases this size. It's got 2 USB Type-A ports, it's got a single USB-C port, and it's got a combo audio jack as well as LED and power buttons. So looking at what we can fit inside the case, starting with motherboards, the V1 can support ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX motherboards, though technically it could also support eATX boards if you're willing to let it overlap the cable pass-throughs, which are nice, rubberized, and generously sized. Now, what the V1 does give us is the option to mount a motherboard at 2 different heights. This is great if you need more room at the top for thicker radiators, or in case you want to leave extra space between a capture card and the bottom fans. APNX also includes a movable cover on the back of the case so that there is no visible gap between the motherboard's I/O and the case. Since we're in the neighborhood of the PCI lanes, let's move on to GPU support. The V1 supports GPUs with a length of up to 395 millimeters, so it has plenty of room for larger GPUs. Not only that, but the APNX V1 has a built-in adjustable GPU support bracket, which is incredibly functional and useful for those chunky GPUs. It was one of the highlights of this case. But if you want to vertically mount your GPU, APNX does sell the APNX vertical GPU holder kit for around $80. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but you can see we definitely used it in our showcase build, and for a very good reason. Now moving on to support for fans and cooling, the V1 can fit up to 320mm fans at the front and right of the case. If you want to go bigger, the V1 will accommodate either 2 140 or 2 160mm fans in the front position. The V1 also has room for 3 120s or 2 140s up top, 3 120s down at the bottom, and 1 120mm fan at the case rear. As for radiator support, the V1 can fit up to 280 or 360mm radiator at the top and the front, right sides, as well as a 360mm radiator at the case bottom. If you wanted to use a 120mm radiator at the back, you could absolutely do that too. Now moving on to storage space, the V1 provides a really interesting solution for drive mounts. While this isn't the first PC case to use a hinged cable cover for drive bays, it has an offset design to give builders the option of mounting 2 3.5-inch drives or up to 6 2.5-inch drives without taking up too much extra space. And if you don't want to use the panel as a drive bay or as a cable cover, you can just remove it and throw it away. Now, as for PSU support, the APNX V1 can fit PSUs with a length of up to 220 millimeters. This is great news if you have a longer PSU, but really this is the case where the Lee & Lee Edge PSU would really thrive. Now, rounding out our tour of the inside of the case, we have unified front panel connectors as well as USB 3, USB-C, and HD audio. Now, there are two interesting things about these cables. The first is that they're flat cables, which actually makes them super easy to manage. The second thing is that the front panel cable also has a 2-pin ARGB connection as well. So if you're using an internal hub, this would allow you to connect to the hub and control your ARGB with the button at the top of the case. Now, the downside we see here is that you would have to strip the 2-pin connection away from the front panel cables to give it more length. Otherwise, you're going to need an extension to go between it and the hub. Now that we know the ins and the outs of the APNX V1, let's take a look at the thermal performance. As a reminder, the specs for our test bench are on the screen right here. They're the same parts we use in all of our PC case tests, every time. While idling, the APNX V1 averaged 25 degrees Celsius. This put it in line with cases like the NZXT H7 Flow, the Fractal North XL Mesh, the Antec C8, and the Corsair 3500X. Now, moving on to the CPU load test, the V1 did not move from the cooler end of our charts. At an average of 71 degrees Celsius, it kept company with the H7 Flow, the 3500X, as well as the tempered glass North XL. For context, it came within 3 degrees of the GT302, which is not bad. As for gaming, call the V1 stubborn, because not only did it come within 3 degrees of the GT302, but it tied for third with the new H7 Flow from NZXT. At an average of 41 degrees Celsius, the APNX V1 not only kept its cool in gaming, but it beat the NZXT H6 Flow at its own game. As for GPU temperatures, at idle, the thermal average of 30 degrees Celsius was what we saw for the APNX V1. This put it in line with the NZXT H9 Flow, but 2 degrees behind the NZXT H6. Under GPU load in our gaming benchmarks, it fell a bit more in the middle of the pack with an average of 62 degrees. This positioned it next to cases like the Fractal North XL, the 011 Vision, the Antec C5, and you guessed it, the NZXT H6 Flow. Now, one note here, guys, is that we did not test the GPU vertically mounted. We actually tested it in the horizontal position, and we do that for all of our cases. So you might be asking, well, the performance is because you had it vertically mounted. No, we actually tested horizontally mounted, and that's in all cases. Now, with thermals tested and a build or two completed, would we recommend the APNX V1? Well, we're going to give the APNX V1 a compliment sandwich. There are some things we love about it, but layered in between the good things are some things that make this a more complicated case in some respects. On the pro side, the angled fans really make all the difference in the dual chamber case. Much like we saw on the NZXT H6, air can easily move around the parts, getting cool air where it needs to be. Now that we've seen a few applications of this method, it looks like the angled intake is a far superior way for cooling than side intake inside of cases like these. But that's not to say that side intake is dangerous or bad, it's just slightly worse. Now, going back to fan mounting, we also love that all of the fans live on removable brackets. From an ease of installation standpoint, this is absolutely fantastic. We also love how easy it is to tear the case down. Now, the top bracket does have 6 screws holding it in place, as does the front panel. It's not entirely toolless, but it's also not overly complex in this arena at all. But what can get overly complex is making a build look good inside of the V1. Now, for starters, the top bracket is very particular about how you mount a radiator to it. For a 360mm radiator, the bracket is absolutely fine. But if you're looking for either a 240 or 280mm, your options for mounting are kind of more limited. A 280 can only sit close to the back of the case, while a 240 can either fit all the way forward or all the way back. There is kind of no middle ground. Now, while there are some nice cable pass-throughs with nice, large wedge grommets, there are others that leave wide open gaps that you can see cables through if you're not careful. Then there's the opening at the bottom. It's angled in a way that it has some benefits for guiding the case's I/O cables through, but for our 12-pin GPU power cable, we struggled to get it through. We eventually got it, but it was a chore. Now, what we also struggled with was the distance from the PSU to the GPU. Without extensions, the distance to go from the PSU down to the bottom of the case and up to the GPU was longer than the standard PSU 600mm cable. Now, the problem was fixed in our showcase, but that was because we used APNX's vertical GPU mounting kit, which we really liked. It was easy to install, and it really did help our build look much better in the end. As a side benefit, it also helps obstruct the bottom pass-through. And speaking of hiding cables, we really liked that APNX had small hooks at the bottom of the case to guide fan cables. While this is a small touch, it's something that goes a long way for cleaning up a build, and it's something we've seen in Corsair cases for IQ Link cables. On the flip side of hiding cables, just know that it can take a lot of careful thought and planning to make a build look truly great inside of this case. Some of the cableways are really big, and in some places, those bigger openings can make cables really hard to hide, especially if you mount your motherboard in the bottom position. Understand, with all of this, the APNX V1 is not a bad case. It's just a more complicated one to build in if you want to make something look super clean. Now, for context, this build right here, the showcase one, took 4.5 hours to build, which was significantly longer than most of our cases. Now, we are very particular about things like cable management and giving each case the best possible light to shine in, but when we look at the V1 as a whole, it really does require someone with an intermediate to expert level of skill in terms of making the case look extra clean. If you're like a slam and cram kind of person where you're building PCs, just be aware that more cabling is going to be visible than what you're used to. There are just a lot to account for when you're managing cables in this one. So this really comes down to your personal preference here. We totally admit that we're extra when it comes to PC cabling and PC building, but that may not be you. Now, if you're the type of person who wants to take the time and plan carefully, the APNX V1, honestly, it can look really great, just like this build. And we think that it could be a great project for someone like you. And if you don't care, it could also be a good case for you if you just like everything else about it. While it's hard to ignore the inspiration, the V1 takes things that we loved about the NZXT H6 Flow and it adds its own pizzazz to its outside-of-the-box dual-chamber design. Not only that, but it does a really good job of keeping both the GPU and the CPU cool. And with that, this one's done. Those were our thoughts on the APNX V1, but we want to know what you think. Is this asymmetric design one that you like, or do you prefer cases that are a little bit more boxy? Also, do you care about cable aesthetics, or are we making too big of a deal about it? I know I'm gonna get some comments on that one. Let us know down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, go ahead and slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring the notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this right here on Robeytech. And if you wanna continue the conversation or maybe discuss more about the builds or cases you should use, head on over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech. Amazing place to talk to other tech and PC enthusiasts who love to have these discussions. And you know what? You might just make a friend. Also, follow us at Robeytech absolutely everywhere. Thank you so much for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.